Hey everybody, welcome to Sex is Medicine. I am your host, Davy Ward Erickson, here with another fabulous episode of the #1 resource for holistic sex education on the internet. That's what we like to say anyway. It's wonderful to have you here with us again this evening, and I have a wonderful, wonderful guest that I am delighted to share with you. Her name is Amy Taylor, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. Amy is an exclusive companion based in the United States. She's an MBA, a commercial pilot. That's so impressive. A several-time cover model on Playboy, Maxim, FHM, L'Officiel, and Inside Esquire, GQ, and Sports Illustrated. Good Lord. When she's not in front of the camera, she's enjoying the sunny skies, flying, keeping fit at the gym in Los Angeles, or playing at the beach with her dog. Thank you so much for joining us, Amy. Did I miss anything in your bio?
Well, thank you so much. It's great to be here. I really appreciate it.
I'm so impressed that you're a fighter pilot.
Oh, hardly a fighter pilot, but yeah, I've flown cargo, I've flown charter, I've flown as a flight instructor. I've flown for a hobby, obviously, before all that. So I got my commercial licenses because I wanted to fly bigger, faster equipment, and doing so as a hobby gets way too expensive. So I had to do it on the line for pay to be able to keep doing it. So
wow, so you can fly like big planes.
Business jets, a couple different types, and I'm typed in a regional jet. I never flew it as a job, but got typed in it, and some turboprops, and then lots and lots of little planes. So. But not like a big, I don't know how to fly like a 747 yet. Maybe someday.
Wow. And so before we get into the rest of the stuff, I'm so curious, what made you want to get your pilot license?
Oh, so my mom's dad, my maternal grandfather was a pilot. He was Air Force. And so I grew up knowing about flying and flying a little, knowing about little planes. And it was just, the world's beautiful from above. I think in the same way that I enjoyed dropping out and being on set modeling and creating a fantasy of cool photos or just pretty shapes of the body. Or I enjoy being a companion because for a while you get to drop out with another human and build this little private secret world. Flying, to me, when you're up above the world, I mean, first of all, the view. Okay, so that's a view we've only had for about 100 years. No human eyes ever saw that before. And it also shrinks up the world. You can be anywhere in the world in a day now, basically. And that is a miracle. And then it's a mastery of some pretty violent engineering, right? Combustion engines, and some pretty basic physics, Bernoulli effect. You know, you don't fly because you push the air down. You fly because the air vacuums you up, basically. So we call our planes homesick angels because they're just going where they want to go. So I find so many things about aviation miraculous that I had to end up doing it. So
I love that.
You should try it. It's easy.
Well, hey, you can come pick me up in Kelowna. There's an airport, and we'll go for a fly. Let's do it.
I think also there was an aspect of it that so few women do it, and when I knew that as a younger girl, that made me want to do it. You know, sort of the whole, anything they tell you can't do, you're gonna be like, oh, watch me now.
Exactly. Yeah. I love that. I love that part of it. And so you are an escort and you are a sex worker. So what got you into the work of escorting and sex work? Was it something that you always wanted to do, or was it just kind of like a happenstance fluke?
Well, so in college, I dated this frat boy when I first started college, and it was pretty lame. He didn't even have his own bedroom, and it was dirty in his frat house. And he was cute and nice, but then I volunteered in the ER, like you candy stripe. And I met a guy who was a first-year doctor. He'd just gotten out of med school. So he was like 11 years older than me, but he wasn't he was, older, but he was only like, 29. Mm-hmm. And he started taking me to like really nice restaurants and nicer, I didn't grow up poor, but nicer things than I had seen, like 5-star hotels and the opera. And I was like, oh, and he was nice. And too, he wasn't some mean old guy with money. I was like, oh, this lifestyle is better. Not better. But just, this is fun. I like caviar was yummy. And, I've never, and maybe he was kind of gross dating an 18-year-old. I don't know, but I loved him. We dated for many years, and I was exposed to a considerably nicer lifestyle than I had seen growing up. And then during that time I was dating this guy, one of my sorority sisters had worked for an escort agency in I went to Berkeley, and she worked across the bridge in San Francisco with tech guys. This is 1999 and the second tech boom. And she confessed to me that she was doing this. And maybe my first perception of it was overly positive, because her experience was, she said, I go out to dinner with these tech guys, I come home with a few $1,000 and it's nice and they're easy and I can pay for college. And I was like, well, what? Like, I'm doing that for free. Like,
you get paid.
Broke at that age, and I was living in a sorority house and saving up for dollar Chinese, and I had the rich boyfriend, but he didn't give me anything. So actually I was spending a lot to like be able to go on the dates and have the dresses and things. And so I didn't do it, but I filed it somewhere, obviously in the back of my head of like, hey, that's a thing. And then I came down to Los Angeles for graduate school, and this doctor and I didn't survive the distance. We broke up. I found myself heartbroken over him, did not want a serious relationship. I kind of wanted to sow my oats a little. Mm-hmm. In my mid to late 20s at this time, and real broke, with big bills for graduate school. So a massive need for money fast. And I was like, oh, I'm going to do that escort thing. So I looked around for an agency to work for. Nobody would hire me. They hired, models, and I was cute, but I had a different nose than I have now. I had different boobs than I have now, and nobody would hire me. But one agency owner said, well, you really are a grad student, and you're cool and you're smart. Like, you don't need an agency. You should do this on your own. And I was like, huh? How do you do that? And she said, well, check out some of these websites. They were advertising websites that we used to be allowed to have.
Before SESTA and FOSTA. Yeah. Okay.
We can talk about that. But so I found some of the big ones, and I was like, oh, well, that's not rocket science. I need to pick a name, take some pictures, get a phone, and get an email. And I looked up what everybody else was doing, did the same. And first client was a Hollywood agent I traveled all over the world with for years. Second client was a cop. That sucked. Got through that. Mm-hmm. And then I got mad because I didn't think what I was doing was hurting me or anyone else. Mm-hmm. And he fooled me, and he caused me a lot of problems. Oh. But then I was like doubling down, because I had met other girls, and I was like, this is a reasonably decent community, and you guys are wrong in persecuting us. Mm-hmm. I knew our neighbors to the north don't treat it that way. Australia doesn't. Europe doesn't. America is wrong on that, just like it is on policing and so many other things, healthcare, lack of. So I doubled down, and I was like, I'm going to finish grad school, I'm going to get a job, but I'm going to keep doing this because this is really fun and it pays my bills, and I'm not looking to get married right now, if ever. So I'm a handful of more people, and one of them I still spend almost all my time with, and things have been largely fine.
So what do you love about the work you do? So I have many friends that are sex workers, and they very often say the same thing about what they love. So I'm curious to know if that's true for you as well.
Well, I'd be lying if I didn't say it's nice to make a livable wage. I'm not a billionaire, but I don't have to worry about, I can buy dollar Chinese anytime I want now. Or even some caviar. And I like that. That's a stress when you're young and poor, and it just sucks to have that eating at you all the time. Yeah. Maybe I would have gotten that anyway by picking a different path by this age, but I only was trained in biotech as an undergrad. I had a molecular biology degree. That's never going to pay a lot, and you're killing animals all day long. I hated it. The MBA produced other results that maybe would have been just as fine, but I didn't like it as much. Mm-hmm. So yeah, okay, the money. The freedom, I make my own schedule, I do what I want, I like not having a boss, I got a little bit of that feisty in me. The other thing I really like is, I really like being around brilliance. I miss UC Berkeley because people were so smart and so intellectually curious. You interview these people and you want to learn about your whole world. And I love LA, but there's a lot of people here who they don't read and they're really good at knowing about the gym. And the gym is great. I like it too. But I am most alive when I'm around people who are sort of intellectually active.
Yeah.
I think my mind is that it fires that way. Yeah. And so I think I get along with my clients because we are sort of similar kind of nerds. You know, these are usually finance guys, CEO, titans of industry, and they are usually very, very smart. And where else would somebody like me meet them? Where else would I have access to those people? I would have probably paid to have dinner with some of them, honestly.
So what does a typical date look like for you? Is it like dinner and movies and that sort of thing?
In the beginning, so I knew I was living in LA where there were so many pretty girls and I wasn't going to get them on that because that's everywhere. So I invented the multi-hour minimum. And the reason I invented that was because I knew I could get them on personality. I knew they're going to like me, most of them, and they did. So the beginning was sometimes cocktails, sometimes dinner, and just hanging out and going home from Beverly Hills at 2:00 in the morning. And then really quickly, some started saying, you want to go on trips with me, whether that was skiing or just accompanying them on some business trip. That probably happened because I was available. I didn't have kids or a husband and I had time. Also because I was lucky to grow up with the privilege of like being taught to ski and golf and a few things that helped me infiltrate their world a little better.
Yep.
Present well in their places.
Courtesan.
Yeah, you know, these are rich guys and you have to not look in a way that embarrasses them. And, you know, the fact that I was a grad student and I speak in the right way and had a presentable background in my real life, all that sold well. So I guess my parents groomed me correctly to be a rich guy's date. Who knew? So yeah, they quickly turned into trips and things, and most of those were super fun. So it kind of just, that's how it happened.
Well, it makes a lot of sense because, you know, back in the day, I mentioned courtesans, and they were some of the most highly educated, highly regarded women of society.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The cliches in Japan often had like PhDs and things. When you're a high-end escort, you do better if you don't have a lot of other commitments like a husband or kids. Not that you can't have those things. Many do. In fact, probably most do. But you're just going to be more available if you don't. And so that leaves a lot of time when the guy's busy with his family. What do you do with yourself?
Yeah.
You go get degrees and learn things. And luckily you have the money and time to do it. And it makes you a better escort if you're interesting. Because if they're seeing you a lot, you want to have new things to talk about. And their wives are doing the society stuff, right? They're the public face of the marriage and they're raising the children and keeping the home. And they tended to usually marry women of of higher social class than I grew up. Mm-hmm. My dad's a professor and my mom's a housewife. And they most of the time marry some like Kennedy type woman, right? Like they don't marry people like me, but they do like you as their girlfriend. Yeah. Because of that, like you're intellectually interesting. I've had countless clients tell me that it's neat that I discuss books and their wife hasn't read a book in 20 years. I would argue that's not fair to her. She's busy raising their children.
Yeah.
A lot of these men, they can't find everything they want in one person, nor probably should they be asked to. So they have their wife and then they have their girlfriend, right? Mm-hmm. I think it's always been that way, as you suggest. We are we're job sharing, I guess, of this man.
Sharing the responsibility for entertaining the man.
Hey, every now and then you meet a wife who does not care at all. She's like, you deal with him. Because, I mean, sometimes you wouldn't believe it. Sometimes they have a boyfriend and they're just married for face or for the kids or because they're best friends and they like each other, but sex is gone or whatever. The reasons are as varied as humans themselves, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of different.
Yeah, and I've seen that in my work as well, and it's so important to not judge, right? Because I've seen couples that choose to stay together because of the children or the house, and it's very amicable. It's not like they're in pain with each other, but they just don't want to have sex. And so they're able to meet those needs outside of that relationship, and it's a really healthy situation for them. So
are they both happy, or do you sometimes find one is putting up with it to...
Oh, absolutely. All of the above, right? In some cases, it's beautiful and wonderful. In other cases, it's miserable. You know, it's, again, like you said, it's as varied as human beings.
Yeah. I have been called by wives twice, not good ways. And I had one wouldn't stop calling. I had to answer and let her scream at me for a while. And obviously it didn't feel good.
Yeah.
She told me I needed to find Jesus. And yeah, it was bad. She also told me to take some of my money and get myself some education.
Interesting. Little did she know.
Well, and I told her you need to fuck your husband. If what he said was true, she wasn't. And I don't know why. He was not the most attractive and she was really beautiful, like a lot of rich wives are. And I don't know. Anyway, they made it. He probably slept on the couch for a while, but they're still married. And I gave my word and did not see him ever again. But it didn't feel good to know that he'd found a solution for his life, but had not asked her for consent, obviously, because the answer would have been no.
Exactly.
And I don't know. I've never been married, so I don't know what people do if they're married and they love each other, but there's some fundamental incompatibility. How can you be celibate and ask your partner to be celibate with you if they don't want to? How is that fair?
Yes, that is a story that I've heard, and it's deeply tragic. And my opinion is sexual expression is a need. It is a biological need. And I agree. It's absolutely unfair if one partner chooses, if you're in a marriage or a committed relationship and one partner chooses that they want to completely remove sexuality from the equation, that's really not fair for the other partner who isn't in agreement with that. And so there's not a lot of options in that case for people. And if they want to stay together, I mean, it's just not fair to ask someone to put aside their need for sexual enrichment entirely. It's like saying, well, I don't want to eat anymore, so you can't ever eat either.
He had a husband, and he didn't. I would have somebody in the bed when he came home. I'd be like, it's going to be him or you. Who's it going to be? Because somebody's fucked right now. And jokes aside, but it gets stranger than that. Sometimes the only sin she committed was to get older than what they are attracted to, and that kind of crushes me. You know, time's a meat grinder, makes hamburger of us all, and you sort of know that that doesn't happen at this age anymore. But when you're young as a companion, often it's your youth that they're very interested in, and that sort of sucks because you're like, oh, it's just that they want somebody younger. But is that less valid that sometimes they just want to relive their youth with somebody for a moment? I mean, it's maybe not the best. I also don't think that person should be crucified. It's somewhere a C- of a thing to do. Sometimes they need that. I think we're talking a bit about how men grapple with emotion and dominance and things. I think men also have very interesting ways of grappling with aging. Have you explored this in your work?
Not as much.
Older men who desperately want to feel. I've seen them a lot of times use escorts as a way to grapple with loss of vitality and youth. Vicariously feeling young, even if it's sort of delusional for an evening. And I don't know that that's so evil. I think women have other ways to do it. We get our fillers and we have our makeup, and I don't know. If men should be granted more lenience for their fear of aging and mortality that everybody has, right? It's the great unknown. So buying an evening with a young person, is that the best thing to do? But that's one way they deal with it, right?
One way they attempt to meet that need. And again, it's like the only thing wrong is the judgment, right? I mean, I don't have judgment about how these gentlemen choose to meet their needs, as long my only caveat is not causing harm to self or other.
Well, and criminalization and some of the laws that are passed, even if you hate sex work, even if you think I'm scum, criminalizing it, it shows, it's already been well documented that it just makes everything worse.
Exactly.
It's everything worse. The problems I've had, 100% of them would have been avoided by decriminalization.
So what are some of those problems that the criminalization of female sexuality is essentially what it is? Which does have a tie to circumcision, like we were talking about before. It does. Societies that practice high rates of circumcision also tend to criminalize and suppress female sexuality the most. So Direct correlation there. But if isn't that amazing?
The social norm thing, we don't want sluts sort of violating the union line of what women have to be, sort of loyal and pious and chaste. We can't have, why police female sexuality?
Yeah, so the correlation to circumcision that we were talking about earlier, the correlation to circumcision is that, as I was saying, that it is it's symbolic, or it's a signpost, or it's directly correlated to violence in society. And the most violent societies are also the most sexually repressive, particularly towards female sexuality.
I would argue there's a mechanism there. That's not even just correlation, the causation. You get laid less, you get violent. Look what's happening with COVID lockdown. Ain't nobody getting laid, and now everybody's flipping out. I'm kidding. It's police brutality. We know the proximate cause, but it's not made less. It's not made less of an issue by the fact that nobody's gotten laid in the last 2.5 months, barely. Some of us have, here and there. But yeah, okay, so right, it's just general dominance, aggression, and violence, right, over little baby boys and over women. Yeah, I find, so the men that I've known, even that are not monogamous, also would not like their wives to cheat on them, almost always, which I've always found very funny, right? Why? Because they provided for her and the kids, and they want her to behave. You know, I bought her a big mansion, and I take her on all these trips. And also, it's sort of, if she won't have sex with me, why would she have sex with another guy? Well, maybe the other guy is better than you. I don't know. Like, but they, yeah, even some of these people who cheat also don't want to be cheated on, which is a funny sort of hypocrisy that maybe we all have. We are jealous creatures. When we love somebody, we often don't want to be abandoned. And maybe if we knew it was just sex, that would be fine. But I think a lot of the fear is that the good sex might lead to them preferring this other person and then really leaving me abandoned, which is maybe the real fear.
That's the real fear, is being abandoned. So when it comes, I wanted to drill into some of the criminalizations that have made your job more difficult.
Yeah, sorry. So yeah, of late, the American SESTA FOSTA laws, which, so we're generally censoring the internet more. When the internet was started, there was the Communications Decency Act, Section 230, that said that websites weren't responsible for the content they host. That's just a sort of a logistical issue, because you can't moderate everything if you're giant like Facebook or Twitter. You don't have enough people. That's also a traumatic job. The people who have to censor Facebook posts, who see the stuff that doesn't get to you and I, the horrible, horrible posts that we don't ever get to, that job is causing so much trauma in the people who have to do that job all day, because they're seeing stuff that, you know, we can't even. So that said, CDA 230 is being hacked away at, and probably the eventuality is that internet companies are going to end up more regulated. I think it's almost sure that's coming. More like media companies. We had obscenity laws on television. We had things you couldn't do and say. We had, 5-second delays for live broadcasts. Probably all of that is coming, because internet's almost 30 years old, and we basically couldn't handle our freedom of speech. We messed it up. And that's because humans are getting human. They just, when you give them free speech, it's beautiful, but they often say things that are pretty horrible. So they went after our sites under the guise of stopping sex trafficking, but really they wanted us to stop communicating about sex work. I've done podcasts and been called a promoter of prostitution to young girls, that I'm telling young girls to get into sex work and, become a cam girl or a porn star or a dominatrix or an escort. They want us to stop talking about it. And what do I think? I think that's because if they let us talk about it, they might realize it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
I would argue that would be a good thing. I come from the biology world. The species on the planet that they're the most promiscuous are the less violent.
Exactly.
Bonobos,
exactly.
Right?
The bonobos, yes, exactly. All they do is eat and fuck all day.
Any battles, and they raise the babies as a village, because they don't really care about whose baby is whose, because they all provide. And we've actually had human tribes that have done that. They didn't have paternal ownership of
exactly
uri and babies. We've done that before, and it might have been better. The current thing of this Victorian one man, one woman, and we're a unit is not working out that well. It's a relatively recent, maybe 1,000-year-old thing, and I won't live to see what happens, but it might have been a failed experiment. We'll see. But I would argue that especially now that we have birth control and abortion and Plan B and things, that you could be cautiously more slutty with condoms and safe sex and testing and, antibiotics. You could be sluttier and people would be calmer and less violent. I would argue that it would be better. More sex, less war.
Well, that's, again, direct correlation. There's a reason the show is called Sex is Medicine, and absolutely, because sexual pleasure releases all these opioids in the brain. I mean, after some good lovemaking, we just want to hang out, eat food, right? And play with the cats or something like that, right? I mean,
I need to get laid usually.
Yeah, and there is a direct correlation between, again, as we were talking about, the most violent societies are also the most sexually oppressive. And yeah, people when they're not exploring or when they're denying and oppressing their sexuality are cranky as fuck.
That said, the original policers of sex were sort of the organized religions, right? And that was because how are you going to get power over the masses of people? The easiest way is to tell them that something that they all do is really bad, but that you've got the solution to either sell them or force them, right? So the Catholic Church in Europe, or you name it, what does everybody do? Everybody fucks, right?
And eats and sleeps.
Well,
fucking is like eating.
So gluttony and anything that most people do is bad, but we've got the solution. So listen to us and tithe to us and pray to us and worship us, and we will absolve you, and you will not go burn in hell, and you will. But only through us can you solve the fact that you are a natural born sinner and there's nothing you can do about it. You are evil from the moment you're born, but we have the solution, right? So it was church, and now it's the courts and the police. I mean, 30% of America has a record now. Everybody's got a criminal record. Everybody's been dealt with, been ticketed and cited. The files they've got on everybody. So it's the same thing as the church. Normal human behavior, sex, arguing, free speech, criminalized. And here now we have our courts and our cops to correct you, maybe incarcerate you for a while, maybe just cite you and keep some notes on you forever. Criminal records are with you until you die. And we're going to sell you the solution to enforce our norms on you. And that is because the only way you can subdue people's natural, wild, beautiful freedom is to make them ashamed.
Yes, amen. Exactly.
Right? So criminalization of women wanting to capitalize on their youth and beauty or their willingness to date a guy and obtain resources for it from men who have traditionally hoarded those resources. It's allowed through marriage. That part's just fine. But if you do it in another way, we're going to decide for you that that's very bad. Then we're going to make you feel terrible about yourself. I mean, the only way to absolve yourself after being a sex worker is to sort of retroactively decide that it was abuse and torture and that now you are reformed. And oh my God, ain't no sex worker hater like a reformed hooker. Yeah. So there's someone out there. And to fix some shame in you, because when you are ashamed and you love yourself less, you are far easier to control, right? Healthy self-esteem is dangerous. Can't have that.
Yeah. I love that. 7 deadly sins as marketing ploy by the church. It's marketing. They were just marketing to you. They were speaking to the pain of your unmet need.
And so things like Sesta Fosta, they've taken away our communication. And all they did, FYI, folks, is shove it underground. There's already secret apps. There's greater abusers. A lot of younger girls have gone back out on the streets, which has been a goldmine for pimps, not all of whom are very nice. My personal problems, there was a site called the Erotic Review, was run by an online pimp. And he wanted me to, what you do is you have your clients write reviews, and then he charges money to read those reviews. So sort of an indirect pimp, right? He makes his money off this website, and it's your labor and your clients that he's sort of commoditizing and selling. And I refuse to be part of that system, because reviews of sex acts criminalize me in America, so I don't want that anyway. I don't want to sell sex acts. You buy my time. You don't buy access to sex with me because it's illegal here. Secondly, because I'm not here to make that guy money. You figure out a way to make money on your review site. That's not my job. When I told him that I was unwilling to be part of that system, he did what pimps do. And because I had no legal protections in my country, he outed me to my friends, my family. I lost everything. I lost most of my friends. I lost my job. I, at the time, was pregnant and miscarried my unborn son. And yeah, you know, I was consumed with revenge. I moved away, got another job in another state, rented so that there'd be less record of where I lived. And I sued him. And turned out he was kind of an idiot, so he didn't even show up in court. Turned out he had some drug problems and was a thug. He was had been arrested for raping a woman a few years ago. He's just a bad person. So I won the case, and when I won the case, he came to where I was living at the time, Phoenix, Arizona, to kill me. And luckily, was put in prison for a few years. Yeah, you can Google it all, the Erotic Review, and there's news articles about it. And he's out now, and so far so good. But my point is that the fact that the business is driven underground by criminalization, which is the profit of shame, is what allows men like that to exist.
Exactly.
If my business were legitimized, there would be real competition, there would be real businesses running things, and he would be outcompeted because he was just a stupid garbage person. So, you know, we'd have publicly traded companies with, you know, you could go to court and hash out your stuff there, and it would be, but that would take the mental and moral leap to legitimize non-monogamy, and that takes a culture shift that
maybe it's good. Revolution is on the horizon. Who knows?
You get it. You guys do it. My colleagues that live up there don't live in terror of their government.
No, not at all. I mean, obviously it's not perfect, and there's issues in the system that I'm not aware exactly. Like I don't have it all cohesively in my awareness, but my friends who are sex workers, of course, they're aware of all that. And it's way better than the States. The sex workers are not criminalized. I believe the clients are criminalized, but it's not enforced. In fact, Vancouver Vancouver City has clearly stated that they have no interest in criminalizing sex workers because it's nonviolent crime. They're like, why would we criminalize sex workers and their clients? Because it's not hurting anyone. So it's like illegal on the books, but they're not going to they're not prosecuting. They're not actively prosecuting.
Well, that's better.
Yeah, it's way better. It's way better. Yeah, and the puritanical culture in the United States it's oppressive, and exactly it when it drives things underground, that's where things can fester. It's the shadow that we were talking about. They fester and they get nasty in there. So now,
it's the love of the transgressive that is the criminalization thing, because it's, you know, the difference between the media portrayal of us and the reality of us is so bizarre to me that it's almost like they want it to be more sinful and evil and dirty than it really is, because the reality might be kind of boring, that most of the sex workers are just your yoga teacher and that single mom that you know from Whole Foods, and that everybody has sex. Everybody. So I think they create, what did they say about the mafia? They used to create the problem and then sell the solution, right? They bust in your windows and then sell you protection.
Right.
I think I had to go to court last year, and this big, shining, expensive glass building was mostly empty. And as you're waiting around, dealing with your stuff, as you see cases coming and going, and most of them were just bullshit. Like two people that got drunk in a bar and one slapped the other one and now they're in court for assault. They should just apologize to each other and go home. And instead you're wasting a ton of money and time. Some of the things that were happening there were serious. Most were not. And it was just this colossal waste of people and power and money, and creating a business that did not need to. I mean, look, we've shut down almost everything and it was functioning, right? So how much stuff did we not need? A lot. I think we create criminalization of sex work. I mean, I have colleagues who think that it's a fun thing for the cops to go do these vice stings, because then they can, I mean, that's what happened to me when I was arrested. That cop got to have a good time with a girl in her late 20s, and then he got to throw me on the floor and arrest me and make my life hell for a year. Yeah, much more fun than going after a gang member, right?
Tell us about that story if you're open to it. So it was a vice cop who was like undercover busting you. Is that the situation? So you didn't know what you were saying yes to?
It was my second client, and I was very naive, you know, graduate student. And I didn't come from the streets, so if you called me, I was so stupid. And if you said this was your name and what you did, I was like, okay. And you know, the silver lining that was good about that is I learned that people lie, and that taught me very quickly to screen. And the good thing about that is the next liar might have been a murderer.
Yeah.
So maybe he saved me, because it sucked to get arrested and deal with it all in court and lawyers, and it was expensive and annoying. It worked out fine. But he, yeah, we had a lovely time and a great meal, and I was like, oh, and he was kind of nice looking, and I was like, oh, I hope he likes me and he'll date me for a while and help me pay for grad school, and I've got somebody to enjoy time with. I'm kind of lonely, and he's older, but he's nice looking. This will win-win, right? And one thing led to another, and it was fun. And then suddenly he sat up and was like, oh, I should pay you now, right? And I was like, well, like, what guy gets up in the middle of all that and starts, yeah. And there's this moment, cops will tell you about it too, where the cop and the person they're going after both know that something's about to.
Thumbs up here.
Yeah, I just knew something's wrong. And I sat back on the floor, and he was sitting on the bed, and he suddenly gathered his clothes up. It all happened very quickly. Gathered his clothes up and walked across the suite into the bathroom. And at that moment, the door busted open, and an entire SWAT team threw me on the ground and put a gun to my head and handcuffed me. And
they put a gun to your head for having sex with somebody.
Yeah, I didn't even get to, but yeah, I was going to, because he was cute. I wanted to. Nobody forced me. Nobody paid me.
You gotta.
The sex was free. And I liked him. I liked who I thought he was. But and then he comes out of the bathroom fully dressed, right? And they sat me there in my underpants for a while and interrogated me. I was shivering cold. And they searched my car. And then they tried to convince me to help them bust a Russian agency, because I was young there and pretty enough to get employed. It'd be hard to find a female cop and dangerous for her, so they were going to use me as bait. You know what would have happened to me?
Yeah, with a Russian agency?
Then I would be dead.
Mm-hmm.
The Russians would have gotten rid of me. So I said, no thanks on that offer. I think I'll take my chances and I'll lawyer up. And I did. I called the first client, the Hollywood agent, who told me I should be better at screening. And I called him late at night. I went to jail for like an hour and a half and was in there with all the drunk drivers and stuff. And they serve these little sandwiches in jail in America, and they're not very good.
I'm flabbergasted that they put a gun to your head because they thought you fucked somebody.
Yeah, and I'm a threat. I'm a menace to society, apparently. And yeah, it was probably great fun for them. And they did have a female cop there. She did nothing. I know that they didn't think this was a great use of taxpayer resources, but it was probably great fun for him. He probably had a great day.
So is this something that happens frequently to sex workers when what did you say? I'm sorry, the feed stopped for a moment there.
You asked, is this something that happens frequently?
Yeah.
Yes, all day, every day in America.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
This is where tax dollars are going, is throwing young women on the floor and putting guns to their heads for fucking blowjobs.
Yeah, it was great. It was,
oh my God.
You know, and then you lawyer up and you waste all this time and money in court. And this cop actually later told me that I should date his brother, who was wealthy, instead of being an escort. So he basically was going to try to pimp me out to his brother. I don't even know if he really had a brother. He probably, I don't know. This guy was such a good actor. Obviously, after that, I never believed it. And he's retired with honors now from the force there. And that's why I just got mad, because what I was doing was neither a crime nor a sin. I wanted to date. I thought he was nice and was going to date him. And if he was going to help support me, like people do all the time for each other, why is that so evil? And we were having a great time. And why subvert that and lie to somebody and fool them and then give them an arrest record? And that arrest record has cost me since then many times in my life, jobs and travel. And sure, even though there was no conviction of that, the arrest is forever. So, and the stigma of it, every time I've ever sat across the table from somebody who can see it on their computer in a background check, Imagine what that makes them think of you forever. You are a whore in their eyes forever. No matter that you were not convicted, no matter when I retire and this is in my past someday when I'm an older lady, and I'm not quitting anytime soon. I love what I do, but eventually I will. And that kind of was part of it, is if America is gonna decide that I'm this terrible, then you know what? I'll just do this. Because I've already been Hitler, I'm gonna dance now.
It's like a political act.
Yeah. I mean, it's got to be the highest paid job available to women, I imagine.
Well, exactly. That's the thing. But I mean, just for anybody, reclaiming our right to pleasure is a political act. But it sounds like for you, like after that experience, you were like, fuck this. Like, I'm going to buck the system and I'm going to do what is true for me and fuck you. And it literally is a political act.
I think I have the right to have sex for the reasons that I want. If those are love, if those are horniness, if those are loneliness, boredom, what if my kink is rich guys? I was young and poor. That's not rare, you know. I just think you don't decide for me what my consent terms are. And as you know, they can change. You can be into BDSM for a while, and maybe when I'm older, I'll be super into younger men. I don't know. I was exploring my youth and dating around, and I liked older men. I will never agree that what I did is something evil or shameful or wrong. I just don't. And
it certainly did not deserve a gun to your head.
It taught me to screen. So something good comes out of everything terrible. Like we were talking about in these horrible times in the world, you have to try to glean. And if nothing else, everything is education.
Yeah.
If nothing else. So yeah, Officer Tom, fuck you, Tom.
So in regards to that, because you did say all day, every day, these sex workers, predominantly women, some men too, some transgender as well, non-binary, all included, but are being abused by the system.
And usually it's the most marginalized of them, because they got me when I was new, because I didn't have regulars and I didn't know how to screen. I was young and dumb. But think about it, if you aren't blonde and thin and present the right way, you don't have a constant stream of clients. So you take maybe a little bit more risk so that you can buy food for your babies. So the problem is that the ones they get are usually the ones who can least defend themselves in court, lawyers. And as is typical of the criminal justice system, they get the low-hanging fruit. They know that that's the easiest to get. Those are the ones they go after. It's the easiest convictions to get, because that's the person who can't spend $50,000 US to lawyer up and fight, right? They know. We had that famous case of Robert Kraft, the owner of the NFL football team, who got caught going to a massage parlor. He's a billionaire. He lawyered up. He's fine. But the woman who gave him massages was thrown in jail, and I think is still fighting her case. And she's, an immigrant, I think she's Vietnamese. So as usual, now, old rich white lady, if they came for me again, I would fight like hell just for the fun of it. But that is particularly unfair, is that the most marginalized sex workers, which tend to be often like immigrant workers. We have a lot who are DACA. Do you know about DACA?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So a lot of DACA people that are here for school, they can't get regular employment to help pay for school because they don't have a social number, and they can't get regular jobs. So they often, if it's a pretty young girl, she'll be in sex work in one of the major cities. I know many who are. And unfortunately, we have like back channel websites where men talk about how easy it is to rob and even rape those girls, because those girls can't go to any kind of they can't get any kind of recourse. So they're a sitting duck for the worst violence, not only from bad clients. I don't like to even call those people clients, but bad men, but also often from police, right?
So how does a sex worker community, do you guys support each other? Do you guys protect each other? Like, are there support systems in place for each other?
We try to. There are lots of SWAP chapters. It's like Base One. They, Sex Workers Outreach Projects, SWOP. There are chapters in, I think, almost every major city. And they do a lot of good work. There are people suing about FOSTA and SESTA in this country. There are legislators starting to come out, usually on our Democratic side, starting to come out to say we might need to really look at decriminalization. So it's a start.
Yeah, it's a start.
They're typically very bad for sex workers if you look at human history, because when people get real freaked out about disease, they tend to want to burn the whores. So I've even seen that recently, that everybody's fear of germs right now. So I worry for our efforts right now, but we'll see. Yeah. So we have groups, we have like little secret apps where we talk. We have bad client lists. We use a reference system where, you can't see somebody unless you know somebody. We have our little, we're survivors.
Yeah. Wow. So we only have a few minutes left. So what are some things about sex work that are interesting and fascinating that not many people know?
Oh, that's great. So in my career, the diversity of clients. So I used to have one client who it was almost like a requirement for you to talk dirty. He was very audio philic, like some people like to hear stuff. And so lots of dirty stories, and I would run out of content because it's a lot, right? So on flying to see him, we always met out of town somewhere in the world, and I would look up on literotica.com. Thank you, Literotica, for existing. You saved my career for years. And I try to get plot lines, so I had some fodder for this dude, and it was exhausting, mentally. I would have rather just done easier stuff. The diversity of clients. I made a mistake once and flew to Japan to meet a guy who, it turns out, had been using a translation program to speak to me during email. That's how I learned you should talk on the phone first. I never did. And it turned out he spoke zero English, zero. So it was a long 3 days. He was very nice, but it was a lot of hand gestures and, why would he hire me? I don't know. The embarrassment of, and then the bodies, we see the intimacy of aging bodies and the humility it takes to disrobe in front of somebody often much younger than you. And I love that it's given me, you wouldn't know that sex workers, we get a private window into the aging. Most young people don't spend a lot of time around old people. Yeah. And so I got to see down the road, and I'm so grateful for what that gave me, that I saw that older people are sexually alive and they're not gross or to be parked somewhere else, and that they need touch and love and affection too. I'm grateful for that, because it will serve me as I go forward into aging to have seen that when I was so much younger than most people see it. So yeah. And the humility of it all. I've had clients that hated me. I once went and saw a guy and we went to Mexican food for dinner, and then the next morning he told me that I farted in my sleep all night long. Yeah. And why would you tell me that? I can't do anything about it. It happens. He probably did too, but I was asleep. And he never called me again. So hi, Ron, if you're watching this, I'm sorry.
No Mexican food on dates. Apparently not for Amy. So if you take Amy out, don't take her for Mexican food.
So yeah, it's so weird, right? Because they meet you because you're this hot chick, and then the humanity of actually spending time with a real person, even if they've been in Playboy, is still a human person, which, with all that entails that.
Yeah, and especially if you're spending days at a time, you have to poop together and pee together and brush your teeth and all those unsexy things and fart. You're gonna have to fart sometime. Yeah. So yeah.
Do you ever have something that embarrasses you? I'm still cringing about it now. It's just you wouldn't know that we sometimes keep in touch with our clients even after the relationships is over. I've had several clients pass away, I went to lunch with one when he had esophageal cancer. I'm pretty sure it was the last time I'd ever see him. And there was no pay. It wasn't, I know what people think, that whores are all about money, but that's not true. And clients are not all about, it's just not always true. It can be, depends on the people. You also wouldn't know that these clients love their wives. They typically really do. They just want to have some fun with somebody else. They don't want to leave. The wife is still number one. It's not actually a threat in almost any case. I'm sure that exists, but for the most part, it's no more of a threat than when they go play a game of golf or get a massage. That can be hard for women to relate to, because maybe some women don't compartmentalize the same way. Some do, but I just wish people knew that not all clients are awful. I hate to see them say that about them.
Well, many of my friends who are sex workers, I mean, what I hear from them over and over again, and what I heard from you earlier before we started the show, is how many times they've just sat with a man and, listened to him.
Yep.
And held him when he cried, or stroked his back, or all that, just that human need for connection, that human need for tenderness and care, and how often that's the reason that they are coming to you, is just to have those needs for connection met. And yes, sometimes that includes sexuality, but who cares, right? It's that need for connection and intimacy, and to be seen and to be valued.
I would argue that when they spread themselves too thin, like some of these guys, they find out about this person, they're like, I gotta try them all. And breadth can be the enemy of depth when it's in excess. And I have met men who are a little bit disconnected. Often the men who are doing that are heartbroken over somebody. I'm not sure I don't have empirical data to prove that that's a mechanistic connection, but sometimes they're doing this kind of binging to get over somebody, or because they never had anybody when they were young and they found this way they could try a few. But that actually is usually short-lived. They are humans, and they usually do that for a while, and then the human need for a little more depth sneaks back into almost everybody, beautifully so. I'm glad that you can't avoid your humanity. You can quash it for a little while, but it's always there.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and your ins and outs and beautiful journey and a peek inside the world of a sex worker. And where can people find out more about you?
I'm on amytaylor.com, or on Instagram, amytaylorla, or on Twitter, amytaylor1.
Yay. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us this evening for another episode of Sex is Medicine. You can catch us in between shows at our website, authentictantra.com, and on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, @authentictantra. Have an amazing, amazing week, and I look forward to seeing you next time.